Good morning and welcome to That's My Farm. I'm Michaela DeMott, your guest host, and we are here on the front porch of the Flint Hills near Emporia, Kansas at the Jarrett Moyer Ranch. Stay with us to see Jarrett talk about his cattle, industry regulations, as well as his involvement in the Livestock Association. Stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
Closed captioning brought to you by Kansas Soybean Commission. The Soybean Checkoff, Progress, powered by Kansas farmers.
That's My Farm is brought to you in part by Tallgrass Commodities, big enough to serve, small enough to care.
Good morning and welcome back to That's My Farm. I'm Michaela DeMott, your guest host, and I'm here with Jarrett Moyer on his ranch. So to start off, Jarrett, how long have you been, or just tell me a little bit about your operation?
Okay, Michaela, thanks for being here with us today. We're located in North Lyon County here in Kansas, and my wife and I and my family first bought this ranch just fairly recently, as a lot of farms go, in 2003. I'd grown up in northwest Kansas and we moved from there. Started off, this was farm ground behind us, and we started building barns and pens here to build up our stocker operation, or backgrounding operation, as some people refer to it. We originally just purchased the quarter we're sitting on here and the 80 across the road, and we purchased those from a gentleman prior to this farm years ago. Had been a horse ranch where they had mares that they collected urine from for pharmaceuticals. Okay. And that doctor was in Emporia and was kind of a significant person there. So it's interesting to hear some of the stories that some of the old fence was built by people working off their doctor bills.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned you just got this bought this land in 2003. What did your family do with cattle or in this industry before that?
Actually, I'm fortunate. I am the fifth generation of my family here in Kansas involved in the livestock business. Originally, that was started up in Donovan County in the northeast part of the state. Later, my father moved out to northwest Kansas, or Phillips County. And then so the last leg here, we moved here to Lyon County. We just thought for what we were wanting to do in the stocker business that this area provided us a lot of opportunities, being very close to the Flint Hills, as well as good transportation for cattle coming out of the southeast and eastern part of the U.S.
Okay. So you mentioned you have two daughters. Are they interested in your operation at all?
Well, you always hope so. We'll wait and see. They're both currently attending Kansas State. One is in ag business and the other is in ag journalism. And so we'll wait and see how their interests bloom and what they decide to pursue, but you would always like to have them consider coming back to what you've started. Sure.
So you mentioned you're a fifth generation farmer, so that farm was in northwest Kansas, is that correct?
Well, it's actually in northeast Kansas,
northeast.
yeah. And currently my family still has that homestead, and it's a corn farm as well as they raise cattle there additionally. So still that has a close tie to your heart, but sometimes for various reasons you pursue things elsewhere.
Sure.
But again, we just thought this was a great area for the stocker business with the Flint Hills as well as our operation to background cattle year round.
Okay, thank you. We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
I'm a patient of Kansas Regenerative Medicine in Manhattan. I had stem cell therapy in my hips and my left knee. My wife and I both are patients. We went down there the same day in November. Since then, my hips are feeling a lot better. I can work now most of the day if I want to. And before, if I worked in the morning, I was done in the afternoon, or if I worked in the afternoon, I was sure enough done for the rest of the day.
Soil is the life of a farm, and for 25 years, SureCrop Liquid Crop Nutrition has helped growers produce abundant quality crops while preserving and improving the soils they steward. SureCrop offers complete soil and plant analysis with cropping recommendations, delivery direct to your on-farm storage, and quality crop nutrition custom blended for your field. Choose SureCrop for the assurance of excellence for your soil. Call today or visit their website for more information.
Lecompton. The name was splashed across newspapers throughout America and Europe. It was debated in the halls of Congress. Lecompton interprets its unique territorial history with 2 museums and other sites. Events throughout the year celebrate history and community. Visit the Territorial Capitol Museum, where more than 70 trees are displayed with thousands of antique and vintage ornaments. And be sure to stop in the gift shops in both Lecompton museums. Spend the day in historic Lecompton, shopping, eating, savoring the rich history.
Watch Ag AM in Kansas online at agaminkansas.com.
That's My Farm is brought to you in part by Tallgrass Commodities. Big enough to serve, small enough to care.
Welcome back to That's My Farm. I'm Michaela DeMott, your guest host, and I'm here with Jarrett Moyer in front of one of his feedlots. So to start off, Jarrett, what are some of the specifics behind the cattle you have here?
These cattle right behind us are calves that would have come to us after they were gathered up as singles in the southeast. Actually, these cattle came out of the Georgia state, and those cattle then come to us. Usually they're weighing somewhere from 300 to 600 pounds. These cattle came in weighing about 350. So they come in light. Part of our job is to let them handle that adjustment. Usually they're freshly weaned calves, haven't seen a feed bunk. So we'll get them up on feed, get them healthy. Part of our job also is putting those cattle into load lots so that it's a better package, and the market tends to reward us for that, a better package to go onto the feed yards for these cattle to be finished. We'll sell those cattle somewhere weighing 750 to 800 pounds most times of the year. Part of our operation other times of the year is that we'll package up groups of calves coming out of similar areas for people to take to the Flint Hills as grass cattle. Those cattle will bring in again at light weights, but they'll also be merchandised somewhere around that 600 pounds instead of the 8 with the more typical feeder cattle.
Okay, so behind us we see your calves feeding time. What feedstuffs do you use?
A lot of the feedstuffs we use, or most of them all come from pretty close by. Our ration's made up of prairie hay that's grown locally, as well as corn silage that we chop and purchase from neighbors. And we're also feeding a little grass silage as well that we put up from our brome fields. Then we're also using distillers as well as locally grown corn.
And I know you had mentioned earlier you have some grazing land. Tell me about your grazing rotations and techniques.
Right. Part of our operation too is kind of twofold in the grazing. One is that we do operate some Flint Hills grass, probably 18 miles away from the operation, where those cattle are typically turned out in May. They come off in early August, late July, off of a 90-day grazing period. And those cattle then are usually merchandised right off of that grass. Another part of our operation as far as using grazing is about half of our capacity is what we would call grass traps, or just small pastures. They'll range from 15 to 25 acres. All those also have a feed bunk along them. And part of the utilization of that is we find when we're starting those calves, especially high-risk calves that have traveled a long ways here, that allowing them to be able to get out to grass, do something besides just being a pen, does help us a lot with the health and as well as our success on some of their conversions and performance as well.
Okay. Thank you, Jarrett. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors.
Kansas Kansas Farm Bureau, the voice of agriculture, represents grassroots agriculture. The state's largest and most powerful farm organization stands up for its members through leadership development, agriculture education, legal defense, environmental advocacy, farm safety, and risk management. Members also enjoy money-saving benefits. To join our organization today or to learn more, go to www.kfb.org or find us on Facebook and Twitter.
Tallgrass Commodities offers producers bulk commodities at a reasonable price with reliable service throughout the whole Midwest. To find out more about Tallgrass Commodities, visit tallgrass.us or call 785-494-8484.
The Kansas Wheat Innovation Center in Manhattan is rediscovering ways to get improved varieties and new genetics in the hands of farmers faster. Grower-led and checkoff-funded research initiatives are bringing about positive change. This grassroots leadership provides a strong voice in Topeka and Washington, D.C. Now is the time to partner with Kansas Wheat in moving wheat forward. Kansas Wheat Commission and Kansas Association of Wheat Growers. Farmers investing in their future and yours. Log on to rediscoverwheat.org.
Valley Vet Supply is devoted to providing information and professional quality products at reasonable prices.
Valley Vet Supply.
That's My Farm is brought to you in part by Tallgrass Commodities. Big enough to serve, small enough to care.
Welcome back to That's My Farm. I'm Michaela DeMott, your guest host, and I'm here with Jarrett Moyer to talk a little bit with him about some of the regulations in the cattle industry. So how are you affected by the regulations?
Well, right here at this location, we are permitted, and we're a small enough operation that we weren't required that we receive a full-blown permit, but what we have is a certificate from the state which allows us to have 400 animal units, which would be 800 head of the feeder type cattle that we have. So we kind of fall in that in-between, which a lot of producers do, Michaela, that we aren't big enough that we're a full-blown CAFO, but yet we are big enough that the state and some regulations get involved. One of the interesting things about our site is that behind these pens that we're talking here at is a vegetative treatment area, and that was one of the options we had when we worked with the state on trying to comply, is that we could plant that grassland behind these pens so that the runoff from the feedlot, the nutrients are absorbed in that grass. We harvest that off of there each year. In our case, we do it with an inch cutter as a haylage. But we harvest that each year, and it's been working tremendously. But that was one of the opportunities we had in looking at how we could comply with the regulation. Some of our other sites that we use, actually the grass traps are set outside of the regulation. We get to use those because there's a green and growing vegetative area behind where the cattle are and where the cattle are. Another one of our operations that we use is actually small enough. It's below the 300 animal units or 599 head. And so at this point, we do not have to have any type of additional permitting or certificates on that location.
Talk about some of the regulations that are in place. Are they necessary, unnecessary? Maybe what are some things that if you were in charge, what could you implement? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it's always a tough call. When you get, any regulation, there's places that probably it doesn't apply, but it does. And I think that's something that you're always battling in, that it's easy to write a regulation, but it's a real challenge to see how it really affects us here on the farm, whether it be our operation or somebody else's, that something that's not clear in that regulation just doesn't make a lot of sense when you get down to the farmstead. But I think that's the biggest challenge, and that so many times that the regulations are trying to push things almost too far in the fact that how clean is clean water? How clean should something be? Is always a challenge. And so I think that there's always room for improvement on both sides. One, the people enforcing the regulation, as well as those of us that are affected by it. So I think it's just trying to have good working relationships with those groups, and we seem to have that for the most part, at least on our operation, and with what I hear from many in Kansas with our Kansas Department of Health and Environment.
Okay, great. Thank you. We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
Next time you see a beautiful field of corn, reach out and thank the farmers who work tirelessly to raise corn for livestock feed, renewable fuels, and exports to feed a growing world population. The farmers on the Kansas Corn Commission work for Kansas Corn with grower-funded checkoff dollars that support foreign and domestic market development, research, promotion, and education to expand opportunities for Kansas farmers. To learn more, visit kscorn.com.
Here's another gardening tip with Annette Jackson from Jackson's Greenhouse.
Fall is a great time to plant perennials, trees, shrubs, and bulbs. Root development occurs with the moist and cool soil conditions, which means better growth next year with less watering and maintenance. The use of mulch on all plantings helps protect from freezing, thawing, and drying out. Let Jackson's help with your next planting.
Jackson's top quality fall bulbs for spring blooming have arrived. Always plant the best bulbs for bigger, better blooms.
Jackson's Greenhouse has what you need today.
Watch Ag AM in Kansas online at agaminkansas.com.
That's My Farm is brought to you in part by Tallgrass Commodities, big enough to serve, small enough to care.
Welcome back to That's My Farm. I'm Michaela DeMont, your guest host, and I'm back here with Jarrett to talk a little bit about some industry changes over the years. So what kind of changes have you seen from when you started until now?
I think it's one of the things that you can always count on in the cattle business that, there's always going to be change. Things will never stay just status quo. As much as we would like them to sometime, there's always going to be new technology, new production methods, and new things to work with and work around. I think a lot of those changes we've still are working through in our industry is that, you look at NCBA's long-range plan, and one of the couple of the key issues that they're hitting on is that, animal ID, and that has been an issue that our industry has had a hard time getting its arms around, and how much of that do we need to do to satisfy the countries that we export to satisfy our customers, the people that purchase our beef, and then at what point are we impeding production or impeding some of the privacy and rights of our producers? I think that's an issue that we're going to have to work through over the next several years and try to get a handle on. Of course, there's the big sustainability that, I think it's an issue that just trying to get some common ground on definition and what's sustainable. I think you'll find no more sustainable business than the beef business. Because if we aren't sustainable, we aren't here. And so I think that trying to work through that and communicating with our consumers, I think one of the biggest changes I've seen is that we're getting further and further away from our consuming public as they get further and further away from the farm. I had a good friend who, large cattleman and things, that told the story of how it really hit him in the face when he took his young grandson to the grocery store, and the grandson didn't know where milk came from. And yet that man's son and things, that was just one generation off of the farm on where milk comes from, let alone where beef comes from, or pork, or other proteins and foodstuffs that our industry provides. And so I think that's something that we're going to continue to be working on, and we need to work on as an industry, and especially in the cattle industry.
The changes that you've gone through and that you've seen, how are you, or what are the things you're doing here on your ranch to keep up with those trends and changes?
I think it's not big things that you find. I think sometimes you find it's the little things that you do, and then after a year or two you go, boy, we've made some big changes. You know, I think one of the interesting things we're using now is a new drug protocol that was a cancer drug that didn't quite work from that, but they're finding that it can do some neat things as far as helping the health of the cattle, especially the high-risk cattle that we get in. So we're doing some work with that, trying to see if that's something that can help. It's an alternative maybe to further antibiotic use, which is a concern with some consumers. And so I think it's a lot of those little things that over time you start saying that made some big changes.
Sure. Okay, thank you, Jarrett. We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
Heinen Brothers, a fourth-generation Northeast Kansas farm family, knows how tough farming can be. Farmers helping farmers. Heinen Brothers Ag, selling and servicing crop protection products, fertilizer, anhydrous ammonia, cover crops, quality aerial and ground application. Call today to learn about our extended term financing program, 800-760-4964. HeinenBrothersAg.com.
Buying a car shouldn't be this hard. And at Brown Chevrolet Buick in Wamego, it isn't. It's actually awesome. Whether you want a new or used car or truck, Toby's team can make the deal. Even if you want to custom order a new car or truck, Toby's team can make the deal. See Toby's team at Brown Chevrolet Buick in Wamego. We're awesome. That's My Farm is brought to you in part by Tallgrass Commodities. Big enough to serve, small enough to care.
Welcome back to That's My Farm. I'm Michaela DeMott, your guest host, and I'm here with Jarrett to talk a little bit about his involvement in the Kansas Livestock Association. So Jarrett, tell me your involvement and your role in that association.
Okay, Michaela. Currently I'm serving as that association's president. That it lasts only about a month more here. So as of the 1st of December, or the first week of December, we'll hold our convention in Wichita, which our new chairman will be, or president will be put into place. That's an exciting time. One, that convention's great just to get a lot of cattlemen in the state together to see what's going on around the state, what other issues. But that's kind of the end of a process that we're going to be beginning here just shortly. That will start off with county roundtables or area roundtables, which producers will come in and we'll start looking at our resolutions that association sets every year and then finalize those in Wichita, which really helps our staff and the folks that work with the Kansas Livestock Association moving forward through their work in Topeka and in Washington, D.C. as well.
Okay, so you mentioned you're the president of that association. What has it done for you and what have you done for that?
Well, it's sure much more of a receiving thing than what I've given to it. It's been a great opportunity for me, just one, meeting a lot of great people in this state that are in the livestock business. Also, just getting to see all of the outside things that affect us here right on this farm, as well as others, and how different things from taxation to government regulation, you get to see how it has an impact. And so that has been probably the thing that I've learned the most through it, is how something that's 1,000 miles away can have a big impact on right here where we're standing.
Sure. Okay, so lastly, I guess, what have you learned by being a part of that association, and how have you brought that back to your ranch here?
What I've probably learned from that is it's important for me to pay attention to those things outside and to be involved. You know, my voice is never going to be heard unless I raise it, and the great opportunity of an association, whether it be the Livestock Association or some of the crop associations, is it gives producers a way to raise our voice to say, hey, that doesn't work for us, and we need to be aware of that. Also, it's really taught me to see how we got to have a connection with our consumer of our product. and trying to get some misconceptions that they may have cleared up if we can.
Okay, thank you, Jarrett, and thank you for watching That's My Farm. I'm Michaela DeMott, your guest host. Stay tuned next week for the next episode.
Closed captioning brought to you by Kansas Soybean Commission. The Soybean Checkoff, progress, powered by Kansas farmers. Watch Ag AM in Kansas online at agaminkansas.com.